Hello, this is Abhishek Garg, and I welcome you to yet another feature from TheCapitalNet TV. It's great to be back with all of you today, and I'm excited to welcome the co-founder of the legendary brand Starbucks, that's Zev Seigl. Zev needs no further introduction, and in the next few minutes, he will share with us his thoughts on the evolution of the global startup and innovation ecosystem over the last 4 to 5 decades. Hi, Zev, and I welcome you to the TheCapitalNet TV.
Thank you, Abhishek. It's a pleasure to be here today.
We'd like to start with your journey of Starbucks. So tell our viewers, how did it all start, especially for a market that essentially didn't exist between the gourmet and fresh roasted coffee?
Well, like all good ideas for new businesses, it started with an event. Two friends and I, the two friends later became my partners. Two friends and I were having lunch one day. We'd been talking about the possibility of giving up our jobs and starting a business together. That was a pretty revolutionary idea. This is the fall of 1970. At that time, people tended to get a job and keep it. But we were kind of restless, each of us. And after lunch, the waiter at the restaurant where we were brought us some espressos. He had asked us, would you like to try our espresso? And we, being young, smart guys, said, oh yeah, we'd like to try that. And he served it to us, and it was terrible, Abhishek. It was just really bad stuff. And so we started having a conversation back and forth. Why is this? Why is coffee so terrible? Not only in this restaurant, but other restaurants you go to, and the coffee you get in the supermarket is even worse. What's going on? And we started doing some research and discovered that there were a few people in North America, a few businesses that had begun to start pushing back against the well-established low quality of coffee. And, that was the moment when the company began to come into existence. And as we'll find out during this conversation, we then did our research, we did our forecasting, we figured out how to finance a small company in Seattle. Our ambitions did not go beyond Seattle at that time, and proceeded. It's very much like the people that I work with now who are trying to start companies. Very similar. Tech companies have their own version of that same story.
Interesting. And how did you finalize the name Starbucks? I mean, it's a brand globally recognized today. How did you finalize that?
Of course, we didn't make it a household word around the world, but we did choose a good name. My partners and I take credit for that. We did what many of the people that are listening to this, to us, would do. They make lists of names, right? They ask their friends, and they come up, and they go to a movie and they hear a word and they write that down. And that's what we did. We had a tablet with handwritten names on pages. And then finally our attorney called us and said, guys, you have to choose a name now. It was pretty funny. And so that night we chose a name. And we were down to 2 or 3 names, and none of the 3 were Starbucks. But there was 2 names that were close. One was Starbo, S-T-A-R-B-O, and the other was Steamers, like a steamship. And we were just talking back and forth, and somebody blurted out, how about Starbucks? And we thought that sounded better. So we immediately sent it off to our attorney. The next day, our friends started, when we told them that the company now has a name, even though it doesn't exist yet, we told them, they said, Starbuck, that's the name of the first mate in Moby Dick, on the ship, the Pequod. We said, yeah, that's really interesting. Of course, we didn't know that when we were trying to make up the name. And it has some other references too. But it proved to be a great name because of that, the 2 hard consonants that are in it, the star and bucks. Starbucks is really easy to say in most languages. And it's easy to remember. And then when the internet happened, there was no internet when we began. When the internet happened, it turned out it was easy to spell. So you could type it in and not make a mistake. So all these things really contributed. The logo also really helped. The mermaid, perfect. It's just a great choice. And as a matter of fact, 50 years later, she still exists.
Great. Why do you think it's been successful for so many years? What's the key to the success of this brand?
Well, yeah, it's a really good question. And I've thought about that a lot because I work with so many startups. You know, I try to help entrepreneurs. Um, and I think I understand now from a consumer's point of view why it's been successful. Why it succeeded from a business person's point of view is a separate story. From the consumer's point of view, high quality products presented in a gorgeous setting, really beautiful stores. And on top of that, a lot of customer education and respect for customers. It's very common for a person to walk into, oh, I had an experience. I can tell you, I had an experience in Hyderabad a few years ago. I was in Hyderabad to give a talk and was going to some of the local coffee bars. And one of the coffee bars I went to was a Starbucks location. And I'm sitting there and my phone won't work. I still don't know why at that moment my phone didn't work. And one of the people working in the store saw that I was having a problem. He had no idea who I was, just a tourist. And he came over to me and he said, "Are you having trouble connecting to the internet?" I said, "Yeah, I apparently am." He said, "Why don't you just use my phone?" I mean, that was just breathtaking for me. This is a guy working as a barista in a Starbucks store who's offering a customer he's never seen before the use of his phone. And that's something that is trained in. He identified that this was his store and he wanted people to have a good time in it, a good experience. What can I say? I just think that's marvelous.
And on the business end, why do you think it succeeded?
Oh, from a business point of view, there are a bunch of reasons, but I have to tell you first, Abhishek, that I didn't understand all these reasons when I was in the middle of it. I was with Starbucks for 10 years and as vice president, and one of the founders. There were two others. And but I understand it now because I've been talking to so many young entrepreneurs, people who are just like I was at that time. You know, people in their late 20s who have a good idea and are trying to start a company. So I would say that there are 8 basic reasons. One is we went into the right business. The coffee business is a place where you can make money. It can be profitable. There are many people that get excited about going into businesses where profit's going to be very difficult. There are many things that made it possible for us to, and that one of them was that we had good timing. This was the beginning of what I would call the food and beverage revolution in North America. People suddenly got more interested in where their food came from and what the quality was, and they wanted choices. And this was a new thing in the late 1960s, early 1970s. And we just flowed right along with that. That worked really well for us. So good timing was part of our being profitable. Also, we had a great team. There were the 3 founders, and by some stroke of luck, the 3 friends had different expertise. We were good at different things, and we basically stayed out of each other's way. Gordon Bowker, fabulous strategic thinker about marketing and market positioning. Jerry Baldwin quickly became, within a year, a pretty good, very good financial executive. And I was what we now call the startup guy. I was the guy who could juggle all of the balls that had to be tossed and caught over and over again. So the core team was really great. Then we added 2 managers, a man who became our person in charge of coffee and tea, and a woman who became our first sales director, both wholesale and retail. She was fabulous. And so we had this core group of 5 people. And there was a lot of mutual respect, very little disagreement. And we were all on the same path. We all understood what we needed to do. Now, the fourth thing is funding. We actually squeaked through in our funding until the company became profitable. We each put in a very small amount of money, the three founders. And then we did what's called sweat equity. Now, today, sweat equity is a team of 4 people staying up all night after their day job, writing code for their new software. For Starbucks, it was staying up all night, building fixtures and painting the store, the first store. We actually built it with our own hands, and that saved a tremendous amount of money. So that was sweat equity. The first store, when it opened, was profitable. Remember, I said we went into the right business, that coffee is profitable. And we opened other stores and then a roasting plant. And when we opened the roasting plant, we discovered we needed investors because we had used up our entire capital base. We were out of money. But we already had our first store, which was well known and very popular, and it made it easier for us to attract local investors. We attracted 3 of them. One of them we knew quite well. And these were just regular guys. These weren't venture capital people. And they gave us enough money to buy 15% of the company. And after that, we never needed investors again while the founders had the company, because we never again outgrew our capital base. Our stores were profitable, our wholesale business was profitable, and we just kept reinvesting and reinvesting. That went on for, I was there 10 years, my partner stayed an additional 3 years, so that went on for 13 years. That was the only time that we talked to investors, but we were adequately funded. We had a great mentor. Everybody should have a mentor as good as the one we have. His name was Alfred Pete. He was about 4 years ahead of us in the coffee business and approximately a lifetime ahead of us in his knowledge of coffee. He had grown up aware of the coffee business. He had worked in Java and Sumatra, understood coffee and tea from the source. Tremendously experienced guy and totally old school, no compromise on quality. And he's just took an interest in us. I found him. He was in San Francisco. I went to visit him, which is something I encourage everyone who's listening to do. If you identify a good source, you should approach them. And today, it couldn't be easier thanks to LinkedIn. You can approach anybody, anywhere. And if it's done correctly, you might get them to help you by being a mentor or coach to you. So Mr. Pete agreed. I had to go to him personally, but he agreed to be a coach to us. And that was terrific. He helped us a lot in our first few years. Our marketing, as I said, was guided by Gordon Bowker, one of my partners. Fabulous. He really understood what we had to do to have the right appearance to the people that we wanted to have become our customers. We used customer education, not unlike a good software company does today. You know, you come up with a sophisticated new piece of software, you put it out there, and then it turns out the customers don't quite get it. You know, you have to work with them, and then they start to understand. Sometimes it's easier to sell the package of software than it is to get them to use it correctly. And in our case, we were selling coffee and tea that was twice as expensive as what you could buy in the supermarket, double. And so we needed to educate people that there was a reason why it was twice as expensive. It was 3 times as good. You know, it was really high quality coffee, fresh as can be. And as a result, people started to understand, and they would share the knowledge that we gave them with each other. And pretty soon, you know, a large portion of coffee drinkers in Seattle began to understand that the coffee in supermarkets was a very inexpensive, but it was worth every little cent you paid for it and no more. And then finally, financial management. This is the 8th reason why Starbucks succeeded. You know, Jerry Baldwin, my partners, became a very good financial manager, a real serious financial executive. And you know, without him, without that person on the team, you probably wouldn't be talking to me today because you never would have heard of Starbucks because it wouldn't have existed. And, you know, without a financial manager, somebody who has the interest of the companies deep in their heart, you're lost. And it doesn't have to be a partner. It can be, a vice president for finance or a chief financial officer. But they have to be able to talk to investors. They have to be able to manage the company's cash position. I see a lot of startups that are missing that person. So those are roughly, that's a few minutes of why I've learned that Starbucks succeeded.
Interesting. And what do you think are some of the pitfalls you came across in those initial days when you were starting the venture?
Well, we did have pitfalls. This wasn't exactly an easy ride. We hired a couple of people that didn't want to take the extra time with customers. That just weren't, their personalities weren't right for that. So they went on to do other things. That was, that's not a problem. But we had to keep an eye on that. We had to do more training than we thought we were going to have to do of our employees. Training in serving customers, training basic knowledge about coffee. And you see that now throughout the coffee industry, especially in the new, what are called third wave coffee bars, the small bars run by passionate people who are typically around 30 years old and have tattoos on their arms. But these people really care about the product, and they have studied, and they have, many of them have actually gone to the coffee growing regions of the world in India and Central America and other places, and learned firsthand about coffee. And, that's really admirable. And that knowledge is vitally important. We also, I mentioned that we ran out of money. That was a real serious mistake. I wish we hadn't done that, in business circles, especially, in incubators and accelerators, you'll hear, it's okay to make a mistake, but you should learn from your mistakes. I think it's better if you learn before you make the mistake, because the mistake can be very painful. And in some cases can result in the loss of the business. Our mistake in running out when we ran out of money did not cost us the business, but it could have. It just didn't. I would say that was the most serious thing that happened to us. We had some good luck in other areas, finding good locations. That was one of my jobs. People will laugh when they hear this, but Starbucks, after a decade, had 6 stores. Today it has 30,000. But those 6 stores were in good locations, and we were very fortunate that way. When we identified a good location, we knew how to get the owner to get excited about us. And the company gradually began to grow. It was what I would call a local success. In one city, in Seattle, the 3 owners and all of the executives and the store managers were leading a good life. It was a successful company. But there is another level of success, isn't there? That's national and then global. That wasn't something that the 3 founders of Starbucks were interested in. But in the early about 1982, 83, the company hired a new director of sales and marketing. It was a man who had a lot of experience, especially in sales. And his name is Howard Schultz, one of the best hires that any company has ever made, because not only was he a terrific manager, but he turned out to be a great entrepreneur. And the world knows his name now. And he is the person who's responsible for all those Starbucks stores in India and throughout the world. He took the company from being local, gradually made it national. Took a long time. Then starting about 1999, they opened with a joint venture, which is a wonderful way to go to another country. With a joint venture, they opened in Japan. It was a big deal. The whole coffee world was just completely blown away by that idea that this company in the United States would expand to Japan. Now, today it seems like a given, but at the time it was revolutionary. And it was tremendously successful in Japan. In that market, brand names matter. They love brand names. It's been a great ride. Over 30,000 stores. They're everywhere. There's 4 Starbucks locations in the Sultanate of Brunei on the island of Borneo. That's about as remote as it gets. Yeah.
Great. So what went through your mind that is this the right time to pass on the baton to somebody else, or it was a natural organic progression from where you were in that point in time?
This is a tremendously interesting subject, Abhishek, and I've been fascinated by it, and I have a very strong position about this. To me, everybody has a point at which they're very effective, and if they go beyond that point, not so effective. Let's go back to Howard Schultz. He retired voluntarily, his own choice, a few years ago, but there was a person who didn't seem to have a level that was beyond him. He just kept growing and growing and growing. He, as a person, as an executive, and he took the company with him to great heights. My 3 partners and I aren't like that. I'm a person who is most comfortable at the startup. When I exited, I think Starbucks had about 200 employees, and that was enough for me. And I was able to exit gracefully. I made money. I had a good reputation, and I went on to do other things. My partners stayed with Starbucks only 3 or 4 more years. And then they sold to a group led by Howard Schultz, who had assembled the capital to acquire Starbucks. And one of those 2 men, Jerry Baldwin, later went on to grow a company and take it public, but it was by no means as big as Starbucks Coffee. And I think everybody has a level. I'm very comfortable with my own level. I've never had a problem with that. People say, oh, you must feel terrible about Starbucks being so successful and you exited in 1980. And I said, no, I've had a great life, and I would have been awful as a participant in a large corporation. And large organizations are not good for people like me. So I would encourage, every businessman and businesswoman to think about this subject. You don't have to be Elon Musk to be happy. I work with a lot of small businesses that are trying to get investor capital. And one of the things I've learned is that by looking at their financials is that you can lead a pretty good life and have financial security and still be in one market without the complications. On the other hand, if you have the talent and the team and there's the opportunity, go ahead and grow into be a regional and then a national company. But in my case, it was easy to decide that it was time to leave because I was so uncomfortable.
Fast forward so many years, Zev. What do you think is making Starbucks continue to disrupt the industry even today?
Boy, it's a really amazing company, isn't it? Now, I want to encourage your listeners to remember that I am an outsider as far as Starbucks is concerned. I would describe myself as a really well-informed outsider. I watch the coffee industry a lot. I visit all of the different brands all over the world. And I have pretty strong opinions about this. I think what's happened with Starbucks is they began to see themselves as brand managers who are in the coffee business. And they manage their brand very carefully. The Starbucks logo and identity is only attached to good experiences. They're super careful about that. And as a matter of fact, if I've seen this happen, if you want to have a lot of mail that you don't want to get in your mailbox, imitate the Starbucks logo and watch what happens. They have, like all big corporations, Starbucks has a team of people that watch all over the world for infractions of people trying to usurp their logo, to misuse it. And so that's part of brand management, is to keep the enemy away from you. And they set such continue, as we did in our way in the 1970s and early 80s. They continue to establish a very high quality level for the customer experience. Yes, the coffee is still pretty fabulous, in my opinion, but the service is over the top. And how do they do that in 30,000 locations? Well, they do it. A lot of training, a lot of layers of management. The design of the stores is constantly evolving. There's some really beautiful stores throughout Asia and also in India. I've seen many that are just astonishing. Typically what Starbucks does, it goes into a new city and builds a store that knocks everybody's eyes out. In the trade, we call those billboard stores. They just stand out and everybody talks about them. And then they build, that's the A store. Then they build 100 B stores that aren't quite as nice, but are good enough in terms of their appearance. So what's happened in the industry, and this is the most amazing thing to me, is that the independent companies, all the little guys who have 1 or 2 or 10 locations, they have to be pretty good because their customers also go to Starbucks. What I've come to think about in the last few years is what would have happened if Starbucks had decided to become a discount operation. There would be no room for the independents. Zero, because then Starbucks would have had low price plus high quality. As it is, they have high price and high quality. That has left a lot of room for the rest of the industry. I really don't know for sure what percentage of the coffee bar industry Starbucks is, but my guess is that it's about somewhere between 25 and 30%. But that's, I mean, I'm not, people should be cautious in using that number. So Starbucks is not the majority of the specialty coffee trade, but the rest of the coffee companies have to be pretty good because everybody's watching Starbucks. That works very well for me. When I travel, I love to go to independent coffee bars. And I find that they're mostly fabulously interesting, full of passion and concern and wonderful coffee. And I think to myself, yeah, they have to be if they want to stay in business.